Welcome to the World of Foundational Horror Podcast, episode 115. I'm Mom, aka Christina, and this is the podcast where I take a tour of classic international horror. On the main pod, Mac and I choose a genre or subgenre of horror and pair an international film with an American one. With these minis, I want to fill in the gaps of my own knowledge and find those foundational films that have influenced and inspired modern horror. The only rules for this project are that the movie has to have been made before the year 2000, and it must not have been made in the U.S. Today I will be looking at Evil Dead Trap from Japan and TESIS/THESIS from Spain. A disclaimer, I will be spoiling the films and most likely be using language that may not be suitable for all listeners. And trigger warning/content warning for sexual assault in Evil Dead Trap. So, Evil Dead Trap is new to me. In Japanese, it is something like Shirio no Wana, literally Trap of the Dead Spirits. It was directed by Toshiharu Ikeda, written by Takashi Ishii, stars Miyuki Ono, Aya Katsuragi, Hitomi Kobayashi, Eriko Nakagawa, cinematography by Masaki Tamura, music by Tomohiko Kira, and it was released on May 14th, 1988, and it has a running time of 105 minutes. Here's a brief synopsis from Robert Fershing from allmovie.com. Toshiharu Ikeda directed this provocative horror film which spawned 2 sequels. Miyuki Ono stars as Naomi, a talk show hostess who receives a grotesque snuff video in the mail. She is outraged as she sees a young woman horribly murdered on the tape, complete with a truly foul sequence in which a blade is graphically plunged into the victim's eyeball. With her crew, Naomi decides to track down the killer, leading her to an abandoned factory where her crew is repulsively slaughtered one by one. The outlandish ending depicts a man giving birth to his own split personality. This movie was new to me. I feel like if I had seen it in high school, I would have watched it every single day. It's been compared to Argento and like a cross between Argento and Cronenberg. And the Cronenberg part is because after we go through kind of a standard slasher where people are just sort of picked off one by one, we do have, as stated in that synopsis, this sort of bloody homunculus that emerges from the killer's body, and then it transforms into more of a man-sized man and attacks our hero Nami. Before that, there is and I don't know what would really happen if a knife went, I haven't looked it up or anything, if a knife went into your eyeball. But this effect is pretty cool because as Nami is watching the tape, it's like she really identifies with what's going on the tape. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's portrayed really well. That's the sense that you get, that she's like engrossed in the scene of the murder of this woman. And when she starts watching the tape, she is pretty bored. She has a segment on Late Night where she invites people to send in sort of outrageous things on video, and she's become very jaded and bored by what's been sent in. And so when the tape starts to play, she's like, oh yeah, woman's tied up, big deal, we see this all the time. But it does look like the killer is actually slashing the skin of this person, and then when the knife goes into her eyeball, there's this like jelly that comes out, and I think it looks pretty awesome, and I'm the kind of person who would generally turn away at something like that, but I like it. It's one of my favorite parts, actually. And she realizes that this is, not staged, that this woman was actually harmed and murdered. And so her boss says there's not enough money in the budget to fund an expedition, to investigate this crime. But if she wants to go on her own, then she can. And she puts together this crew and they go, and then they all get killed one by one except for Nami. And I found out that the guy who plays her boss actually had to retire from acting, I think around 2011, after he confessed to having close ties to the Yakuza. So that's not something that you run into every day. I won't go through all the deaths. They are pretty great, though. One of my favorite scenes is and there are two characters. One's named Rie and one's named Rei. And I kept getting them confused, and then I just decided it doesn't really matter. But because this is not a movie that you watch for character, development or anything like that, but one of them is sort of walking backward like an idiot, and she almost walks into a snake randomly, and the snake is very phallic, and it kind of wends its way up her legs, and then she stumbles backward through a door, and I think a dead body falls out, a dead woman's body falls out, and then she ends up in this chair, and then she's trisected. These huge knives come up through the floor, and they kind of triangulate, and that's a pretty cool kill. There's another one later on where there's this rig that's set up where an arrow is set to fly as soon as somebody opens a door. That's pretty great. And that does happen, but that doesn't kill the victim. Actually, a machete to the face that is tripped when somebody walks into a wire. That's pretty great. There is a sexual assault in the film, and it goes on an uncomfortably long time. It happens, it's happening. They cut away, they come back, it's still happening. And it's a lot, and I imagine it could be triggering to some viewers. After that, the man is dispatched, and then the woman is also killed in a really horrific way, where sort of this metal garrote descends from the sky. I don't know where it comes from, but it catches her over, around the neck, and then lifts her up and over the van, and she's dropped onto her head. And so that's pretty awful. But there is a little bit of a story. It's just real weird. And I have to say, this is actually a pretty good time if you're in the mood for a slasher. I would see if you can find this. I don't know where it's streaming in the US, but I'm pretty sure, because I watched it a number of times after the first time that I watched it, that it's streaming somewhere in the US for free. It might be Tubi, in which case that you're going to run into commercials. So if that's an issue for you, but I would definitely seek it out if you can. I couldn't find a lot of trivia for Evil Dead Trap, but I did find some Letterboxd reviews. Salford10 gave it 1 star. I had fun with the eyeball kill and upbeat score, but found the essay scene wildly off-putting. Felt drawn out and overly graphic, which may be a weird stance to take in a slasher, but I'm doing it. Hard getting back on board after that, despite the campy ending. There. Eagle Marshall gave it 1 star. Well, I watched it. I guess there's that. This is a tedious slasher that doesn't make a lot of sense, with poor pacing and little suspense. I suspect the filmmakers ran out of money in post, because the only music used is 6 notes probably played on a Casio keyboard. The acting is fine, but the thespian demands are low. A couple of the kills are interesting, others repetitious. Dylan Battersby gave it 5 stars. Delightfully bizarre, which I would second. Liam Shank gave it 5 stars. Nobody's ever looked cooler in a raincoat. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that the killer is the coolest man ever, and he appears in this doorway smoking a cigarette, and he's just tall and thin and Japanese, and he's just he's the coolest dude, and he just speaks kind of in this weird code, and it's very hot. Homunculus gave it 5 stars. Fulci takes a trip to Japan in this twisted horror masterpiece that overwhelms with its thick, oppressive atmosphere, filled with a killer soundtrack in a confusing hellscape of an abandoned military base. Creative kills, lots of blood, and the killer the fisherman wishes he was, along with an absolutely insane ending, make this one of my new favorite horror movies. EVNVNN gave it 5 stars. It is literally a combination of slasher, pinku, aiga, saw, exploitation, Suspiria, and more. Is it the best slasher movie? Honestly, maybe. Would my best friend Jack disagree? Probably. Pamela gave it 5 stars. I watched this last night and couldn't stop thinking about it all day, so like the freak I am, I had to rewatch. The same thing happened to me. Matt Stroll gave it 3.5 stars. The only other Ikeda I've seen is Mermaid Legend, which may have set my expectations too high. This is jammed full of awesome stuff, and I liked it very much, but it doesn't begin to approach the sublime heights of ML. Many of the images here are inspired, and this is certainly something I'll watch again, but it didn't completely come together for me on this initial viewing. Well, that's an interesting thought. So, Wohos, get in touch. What do you think about comparing the work of the same director? I mean, I do it all the time, but is it fair to do? In what circumstances is it fair, and when is it unfair to do that? I'd really love to hear what you think. Raza Wakwith gave it 5 stars. Gory kills, deep grunge industrial aesthetic, ice-cold blues with punchy reds, killer soundtrack, and so many curveballs it'll make your head spin. Just when you think you have Evil Dead trap pegged, it yanks the rug out from beneath you over and over again. Pure terror doesn't do it justice. This is a really gruesome, dirty, and tightly paced film. I had a blast watching this, and I hope everyone involved was able to live their best lives in all that glorious late 80s Japanese streetwear. So TESIS, or THESIS, is the other movie I wanted to talk about. It's a film by Alejandro Amenabar, who directed The Others and also directed Abre Los Ojos, Open Your Eyes, which was remade into Vanilla Sky and kind of interestingly has Penelope Cruz in both the original and the American Tom Cruise movie. And I saw Vanilla Sky like a bunch of times, and I only just recently saw Abre Los Ojos, and some of the cast is the same in THESIS and Abre Los Ojos. And this movie is pretty simple. It's a pretty simple plot, but it's gorgeous to look at. The music is amazing. There's some like really kind of frustrating parts of the plot, actually, if you watch it too many times like I have. But I think it has some interesting things to say about how we view beautiful people and how much we may refuse to see the uglier sides of their personalities or their moralities if they have a beautiful face. And I think that's something worth thinking about and talking about. As I said, this was directed by Alejandro Amenabar, screenplay by Amenabar, story by Amenabar, and Mateo Gil. And it stars Anna Torrent, Fele Martinez, Eduardo Noriega, Miguel Picazo, cinematography by Hans Berman, edited by Maria Elena Sainz de Rojas, and music by Alejandro Amenabar. Release date was the 12th of April, 1996, and it has a running time of 125 minutes. And at one point, I knew how old Amenabar was when he made this. I believe he was in his 20s. So he goes on the list of people who really piss me off because they're so damn talented. Yeah, he's just a little bit younger than I am. So, let's see. 1996. I was 27. Yeah, he was 24 when he made this. So congrats to him. The plot isn't really the point, but it has a lot of really cool, there are a lot of really cool beats in this. And in the beginning, it's a black screen and we get a voiceover. There's been a suicide on the train tracks and people are being removed and they are told not to look at the body. But university film student Angela angles to get close enough to look. And they're told that the passenger has been cut in half. And she really wants to see, but she's yanked back away from the scene before she can see anything. She meets with her advisor, a very sweet man who reminds me of somebody I worked with when I was at the university. And she requests access to footage in the archives that has never been seen on TV because it is too violent. As she studies in the common area, listening to classical music on her Walkman, we meet Chema, who is listening to hard rock or metal or something on his Walkman and sort of like switches back and forth as we see the two characters. Angela approaches Chema because she has heard that he has a bunch of violent videos. She goes to his house in which he lives alone. It was his grandma's, but he has decorated it with mannequins that have limbs removed, disturbing posters. I think at one point he's wearing a Cannibal Holocaust t-shirt. Chema is sus because he's socially awkward. He's antisocial. I mean, he really doesn't want to participate in society at large. His house is in chaos. And they watch a video like Faces of Death, something like that, and Angela is disturbed by a scene where a man's brain is being removed. And she keeps asserting that she has no personal interest in violence, it's all for her thesis. So she starts to be revealed as wildly sus too as the film goes on because she's shown here to be a liar because she can't stop looking at these images. And even though she sort of like turns away, there's a really great shot where she's looking, I don't know if it's in this opening moment, but where she's looking through her fingers. I want to like poster of that image. I really like it a lot. But Chema tells her that no one has ever been in his hideaway and that she should feel lucky. He just kind of says the wrong thing all the time. And it's clear that he is attracted to her and he likes her and cares about her, but he just goes about it in the worst way. Back at school, Mr. Figueroa wants to check out this Czech film from the archives, and the librarian says it's so weird because nobody ever checks out that film, but now he's the second person in the same day who wants to look at it. Figueroa goes to a screening room and he ends up dying, seemingly of an asthma attack. When Angela comes upon him, she reaches out to touch his. This is so creepy. She just like reaches her hand out to touch this corpse. And she just, it's just, I don't know. She has this fascination. And I guess it's okay. But some of the things she does later are just like completely whack. And I could see wanting to touch a dead body. I don't have a desire to touch a dead body, but I think I can understand that desire. But I find it so weird that she knew this guy. She worked with him. And to me, it makes it different. And I find it very disturbing. So she takes the video that was in the VCR and she leaves with it. Well, later on, when Angela's family goes out to eat, she watches the video, but she can't see any of the images, like the contrast is too high or too low. I don't know, stuff like that. But she just hears a woman screaming on the tape. And so she records that audio, and then She goes to sleep listening to the audio of this woman screaming and pleading for her life and being attacked and murdered. There's another professor, Mr. Castro, who replaces Figueroa, and Chema somehow realizes that Angela stole the tape that Figueroa was watching when he died, and they go back to his house to watch it. And she turns away from the screen, and he is intently watching it, and he just tells her, don't turn around, don't watch it. But she does turn back to watch it, and we see him stuffing his mouth with potato chips. And she vomits. As they watch the video, we hear screaming and then a gunshot, and Chema says that he knew the victim. He knows the victim. And on the tape, we hear sounds of a chainsaw. And Chema realizes that the person used a digital zoom and that there was only one model of camera that had that functionality, the XT500. And after you've seen this film at least once, this detail is going to be pretty annoying, given what we learned a little bit later. But it is kind of funny to see this as, such a key piece of the puzzle. And it's a nice time marker for the mid-90s. At home, Angela notices some items in her room are askew, and she accuses her sister. But I think we just conclude that Angela is being paranoid. She asks Chema to check his room too, and there is a bit of a comedic moment because his room is just like, clothes scattered everywhere, and he just sort of looks to the left and the right, and he says that nothing is missing. Chema then realizes that the tape has been cut in several places, and that Vanessa, the victim, must have been saying the killer's name, and that's where the cuts occurred. So she must have known her killer. Jorge Castro is the new professor who is taking over as the advisor for Angela's thesis, and he is a real creepy guy. But when he's lecturing, he tells his students that the only way Spanish cinema will survive is if filmmakers give the people what they want, which, ends up with uproarious applause at the end of his lecture. He asks Angela out for a drink, and she's like, no thanks, but she gives him her notes, and then she looks over news of Vanessa's disappearance. She continues to listen to Vanessa's murder through her Walkman, and then there's kind of a dramatic moment where she looks up and she sees that a boy in the common area is filming his girlfriend using a Sony XT500 camera. And so there's just kind of some fun camera work here where Angela walks behind the girlfriend and the focus moves from the girlfriend to Angela. And this happens just as she's turning to look directly at Bosco, who's shooting the film. So she starts stalking. There's a lot of chasing in this movie, which can be tiresome, but this first chase is she's stalking him. He quickly realizes what's happening, and as she loses him, and then he's actually standing right in front of her. But now he starts chasing her, and she drops her files. She collects them, and anyway, they have this confrontation. He grabs her arm. And when he sees what's in her hands, all these news stories of Vanessa, he's like, I knew Vanessa. And Angela goes into the bathroom to collect herself. He comes in. So he's not real big on boundaries or things like that. So I think that's a huge red flag, but he's gorgeous. So we'll just ignore that red flag. Chema, on the other hand, is convinced that Bosco is the murderer. And Angela, mysteriously, cannot find her keys. Then we have another kind of annoying moment when you know what happens later, where Chema and Bosco meet, and Chema checks out Bosco's camera. It does indeed have the zoom feature. And Bosco says that Vanessa ran off with someone. He didn't suspect anything because he, quote, doesn't spy on anyone. Do you? He asks Angela. Well, we know she does. Chema says that Bosco is a psychopath, although Angela thinks that he may be sincere. He seemed very upset when he was talking about Vanessa. There's a weird section here involving Angela thinking that Bosco has broken into her house, but actually he's just come by and he's like ingratiated himself into her family and he stays for dinner. And he is told by Sena, the sister, all about Angela and what she's doing with her thesis. Chema is pretty concerned and jealous also that Bosco's in her house, and they want to investigate where these cameras could have come from, and they find out that the university bought 13 of these XT500 cameras. Chema also does some solo investigating in the archives. He wants to look at the closed circuit recordings, and he bribes the security guy with high-class porn. And there's a very interesting section here where Angela wakes up and she thinks that somebody is filming her. And she just sort of wakes up. She feels like there's like a bright red light that indicates that somebody's filming her. When she turns on the lights, no one's there. But she sits up the rest of the night and she nods off. And then she has this weird fantasy where Bosco was hiding in her pantry. And he has her keys. And whenever he's photographed here, there's a little scene later. He is wearing a white shirt and it's kind of like fuzzy around his image. And it just looks like this, like, I don't know, like sex angel. I don't know. He's just like so beautiful and sexy. But she has this fantasy that he puts a knife to her neck, which scares her at first, then it turns her on and they make out, and then he stabs her and she wakes up. So then Castro calls and wants to meet, and it does not go well. This meeting does not go well because she was photographed, filmed, taking the videotape that Figueroa was watching when he died. And she lies about it. So he's like, oh, really? Let's kind of like look at the tape. And he's like, I can't advise somebody who is like a liar like this. And it's kind of humiliating. But Chema calls her now remember, no cell phones or anything. So it's like, Chema calls like her, in his office and is basically like, Castro's in on it. You got to get out of there. And Chema shows Angela that he has the closed circuit film of Castro with Figueroa in the archives. And he also has determined that there were many other victims besides just Vanessa. But there's sort of been this ring of videotapes involving the murder of all these women. But then the girlfriend, Bosco's girlfriend, tells Angela that the person who told Bosco about snuff films was Chema. And she shows Angela a picture of the two of them with their arms around each other's shoulders. So they've known each other this whole time, which is like super frustrating. There's kind of a sweet section where they get locked in these tunnels and the lights go out. And there's a scene where it's kind of similar actually to a section in Evil Dead Trap where the killer is walking with a lighter and trying to light the way. In this case, it's matches. And it's very sweet. And Chema tells this Oscar Wilde story basically about the unrequited love that this like troll has for a princess. And Angela shows some vulnerability here in that she's really scared and she doesn't want Chema to leave. So there's just this very sweet moment where she just says, don't leave me. And we just see as the light is flickering out, Chema smile at that. So it's very sweet. They find the editing room, but then Castro chloroforms Angela and she wakes up tied to a chair, or she ends up tied to a chair a couple of times. This is the first time. Castro says he's going to kill her, but then a fight ensues and Chema actually kills Castro, which is awesome. When Angela gets back home, her dad is sleeping on the couch for some reason, and he tells her that Sena has gone to the club with Bosco. And so we have this scene where Sena is, she thinks that Bosco is really in love with her and has chosen her over Angela, and Angela just walks up to Bosco and just kisses him full on the mouth as a way to show Sena that, he's not sincere and he's bad news and she should stay away. And so Sena runs back home to safety. But then I think there's some chasing here, and then they make out wildly. Then Yolanda, the girlfriend, gets really jealous. And so there's just a wrinkle here where we think maybe she's the killer because she ends up leaving these like very disturbing voicemails for both Sena and Bosco. Bosco has driven his motorcycle to his parents' vacation home, and he tells Angela that he and Yolanda broke up and he wants to kiss Angela. The lights go out and someone puts a hand over Bosco's eyes. Angela goes downstairs to check out what's going on and sees that Bosco is knocked out. And there's a sort of like a horror movie thing where Chema is, she's like crouched over Bosco's body, and then Chema is like behind her. And there's this terribly sad scene where Bosco just beats Chema to a bloody pulp. And he wants to tie up Chema before they call the police. And he goes out of the room, and then Chema tells Angela, the garage. And when she goes into the garage, she recognizes the tile from Vanessa's snuff film. And then there's this beautiful shot where Bosco just closes the garage door and, seemingly her fate is sealed. And now he seems like, full on psycho. He's talking about how he's going to kill her. And he says first he's going to beat her until she loses consciousness. And then he's going to cut off her arms and feet, maybe cut off an ear and feed it to her. Who knows? Who knows what he's in the mood for? And he puts a mask on and he starts punching her. Punches her like 3 times. But she has a knife somehow. She slices him with this knife and she shoots him dead. So then we cut to a newscaster for a show called Justicia y Ley. And it turns out there were 6 girls buried in the garden, and everyone is in the hospital besides Chema is watching this on the TV. Chema actually literally can't watch it. He doesn't want to, but he can't because his eyeglasses were busted in the fracas. But Angela has bought Chema a book, that Oscar Wilde story, and he's like, I already have it. And she's like, yeah, but this one's dedicated. And so Chema can't read it because his eyeglasses are broken. So an abuela reads it to him, and she's asking Chema out for coffee. And the dedication, very sweet. And so he puts his robe on, and they are walking through the hospital, and everybody is just fascinated with the story. Like it's just silent, and people are staring at the news broadcast. And as they pass all these rooms in the hospital, and they see how everyone is watching the TV, and the newscaster says at the very end that they're now going to show the graphic death of Vanessa, like over the news. Roll credits. A little bit of trivia for this one. When Angela is accessing the warranty database, director Alejandro Amenabar's name appears as a warranted customer of an XT500 video camera. Alejandro Amenabar wrote some of this film while still at university, and that university was the Complutense, as featured in this film. The film had a relatively small budget of 116 million pesos, equal to about 696,000 euros. In Angela's room, you can see a poster of My Own Private Idaho. And this is the first collaboration, as I mentioned before, between Amenabar, Fele Martinez, and Eduardo Noriega, who reunited in Open Your Eyes, which is a better film, to be fair. But this one has its charms. Ashby08 gave it 5 stars. This movie eats for real. It's hard to get into without spoilers, but this shit had me on the edge of my bed, toes curled. You never know what's going to happen next, and it's scrumptious. Claudia gave it 4.5 stars. My Chemical Romance equals Mi Romance con Chema. Fairy Dust 444. Such a good thriller. Normally totally not my genre, but this was so not cliche, and all the characters were perfect. Highly recommend. Ava gave it 5 stars. This film was twist after twist, plus a hot cast. What's more to like? Is that the expression? What's more to like? What's not to like? What more do you want? I don't know. HTTPS_Ines gave it 5 stars. Si Chema fuese Gensi, sería el mítico que descubre Fortune en cuarto de primaria y cambia por completo su percepción de la vida. If Chema were Gen Z, he would be the mythical one who discovers 4chan in 4th grade and completely changed his perception of life. Yeah, probably. Alice West gave it half star. Toda la vida pensando que esta película daba miedo y cuando la ha visto me ha causado más risa por lo mal que actuaban que otra cosa basura. All my life thinking that this movie was scary, and when I saw it, it made me laugh more because of how bad they acted than anything else. Trash. Alsadie gave it 1.5 stars. Una buena idea, buena trama me mantuvo metido todo el tiempo, pero las actuaciones y guión muy cringe. En cuanto a foto y arte, nada que destacar. A good idea, a good plot kept me involved the whole time, but the performances and very cringe script, in terms of photography and art, nothing to highlight. Wow, I really disagree. I think the cinematography is great, and I think that this is worth checking out. I don't, with both of these, don't think too hard. Just enjoy them for what they are, and then go watch Abre los Ojos, and The Sea Inside if you want, and the others. I'm a huge fan of this guy's work. Well, host, thank you for tuning into this mini. I'm really having fun with this series, and I hope you are too. Please get in touch and let me know how you feel about this series, and if you have any suggestions for these minis or the main show, or if you would like to have a discussion about a film that means the world of horror to you. Trademark. Remember, Wohos, we love you. And don't go into the basement.